On a special edition of MorningLine, Nick Beres here with you on a Tuesday. And yes, this is our continuing gavel-to-gavel coverage of the Caitlyn Kaufman murder trial. It continues. This is day 8. Remember, 2 days of jury selection last week, followed by 5 days of basically evidence and then closing arguments, which we had yesterday, and they did not reach a verdict. Many of you joining me now followed along with us yesterday throughout the day, and they started deliberating right around noonish yesterday, quit around between 5 and 6 o'clock, and decided to go home and come back fresh today. And we expect things to start around 9 o'clock, and we're going to go now and take some of your phone calls, your thoughts on what you think the jury's up to, what you think about guilt or innocence in this case. And I welcome you to either be watching us right now on Facebook at newschannel5.com. We're also on the YouTube channel, the station's YouTube channel, and here on the plus. 737-7587 is the number. News Channel 5 legal analyst Nick Leonardo will be joining us in a little bit. He had a matter to attend to. But the plan is, we'll carry you through from 8 o'clock now till a little bit before 9. The judge says she expects to have the jury brought in just briefly this morning to ask how everything's going, and maybe just say, look, I hope last night you abided by the rules and didn't talk about the case. Now you go back into the deliberation room and get to work on this case. That's the plan. And at that point, we may take a few calls, but then we'll break away and we're just on verdict watch at that point. We'll be sitting here and taking into account exactly what happens. If there's anything that happens in the courtroom, like maybe the jury asks a question, they bring everyone in, we'll go on that front. Keep in mind, I don't know where you happen to live, where you're watching. There was, the winter storm warning from overnight, and in some parts of our viewing area, icy roads are an issue. I had no problem coming in from over, in the eastern portion of the city and beyond. Not bad, just wet. But you don't know. Maybe the jurors or a couple jurors are someplace where it's iced up. If that's the case and there's an issue with them coming in, that'll further delay things. But before we get to some of your phone calls and comments on Facebook, just wanted to kind of recap a couple of things that happened, yesterday and give you my insight into what I think the jury is doing at this point. And then I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to share your thoughts on it, jump in and let's talk. Closing arguments were yesterday. Started with Jan Norman, who I think did a terrific job. It took her about an hour to lay out all the evidence point by point by point by point, making the emphasis, something that you heard echoed later in the final summation by Roger Moore, that they were in this together, There you see one of the defendants, James Cowan. He is the one that I think has the jury right now somewhat stumped. And there is defendant Devontae Hill. I believe that the jury likely has already reached a verdict on him of guilty of first-degree murder. That is my take. That's what I would do. Cowan, the driver, did not shoot the weapon. Hill said Cowan did not tell him to shoot, and I think that has created some questions for the jury about whether or not he should be found guilty of first-degree murder or a lesser charge, facilitation perhaps of first-degree murder or second-degree murder. And that is a long list of, lesser charges he could face, and I think that's what takes time for the jury to go through. And so I think they probably went through it all. And the one thing about the fact that they quit yesterday when they did, when the judge asked them around 5 o'clock, what do you want to do? If they were close, and about to reach a verdict, I strongly believe they would have said, we just need a little more time, Judge. We can finish this off. We can be done with this. We can go home and get back with our lives. The fact that they said, we want to go home and sleep on this, tells me that they weren't close, that there are still some issues to be resolved. So I don't think they're going to come in this morning and bang, bang, come back with a verdict in half an hour. I think they're going to come back, start at 9 o'clock, and it may not be till lunch, maybe till after lunch that they reach that verdict. And that's just my guess. But I can't help but think if they had been close last night, they would have said, yeah, let's just stay another hour or two, wrap this thing up. Because I guarantee you, every single member of that jury, it's 9 women and 3 men. They're not sequestered, but the past week, their entire lives have been dedicated to this trial, something that they're not allowed to talk about with anyone when they're back home. And they've been missing work or whatever else they have to do during the past week. They want to get back to their normal lives. So trust me, if they were close, they would have stuck it out last night. My take is they weren't close, and I think the question here is what they do with Cowan. I could be wrong. Maybe they're split and there's someone who thinks that Hill, is guilty of a lesser charge than first-degree murder. I can't get there. I mean, if you're asking me if I'm on the jury, my take is that they both would be guilty of first-degree murder. That's my take, okay? But I can understand how there may be some wiggle room for Cowan, okay, and I'm going to go over why. But Hill, I just, that's my opinion, and I could very well be wrong, but I think Hill's guilty of first-degree murder. So during cross-examination, Jan Norman just talked about, the relationship between Hill and Cowan, the fact that they were gang members, that they were in this together. She says, and wants to remind everyone, this case is about 26-year-old Caitlyn Kaufman, okay, and her murder. She said that the two of them targeted Kaufman after she allegedly cut them off on I-440, that they did this on purpose. That was the motive for the shooting. It took both of them. It would not have been possible for her to have been shot if it was just one of them alone, that they were both involved with this. And she says the premeditation comes into play in an instant, and that Roger Moore followed up on this, that when she cut them off, the bullets weren't through the back of the vehicle, as though, Hill got very angry, grabbed the gun and started shooting, just haphazardly, spur of the moment. No, there had to be some reaction and thought that gives premeditation. She cuts them off, but no, they don't shoot right then. We know they had to have accelerated to catch back up with her and run parallel, at which point all the bullet wounds, and the wound and the rounds in the vehicle, come from the side. So they had to catch back up with her. Okay, that's premeditation, not only for Hill, but for Cowan, who was behind the wheel that accelerated. That's something I can't get past with Cowan. Okay, he also knew he was in a vehicle with Hill, driving around with a 9mm sitting there on his lap in the open. They're smoking marijuana. They're cruising to go pick up his girlfriend. And then someone cuts him off. And you heard later Cowan talk about, well, she shouldn't have done that. And then Hill pulls up and shoots. I think they were in it together. Okay, that's my take. Now, I will say this, Ron Munkabo, the attorney for Cowan, makes good points. And this is maybe where the jury is thinking maybe Cowan should be found guilty of a lesser charge. He did not kill Kaufman. We know that. He did not cause it, is what Munkabo said. He had no weapon, okay? There's no proof that he helped or commanded Hill to shoot this. And in fact, Hill said Cowan had nothing to do with it. Again, though, Hill may be just be protecting a fellow gang member and not wanting him to go down as well. So all of that, I think he says that Hill admits doing it. Cowan was driving. Hill was the one who was reckless. And he just says Cowan did not kill anyone, that he has no responsibility. And he's right. Cowan did not himself kill anyone. The question the jury has to ask is whether or not he facilitated it and assisted. And then, of course, after the fact, we know the two of them did nothing to try to come forward. I mean, a lot of people say, well, Cowan was caught completely by surprise and it shouldn't have happened. Then why didn't he call 911 immediately? Why didn't he pull over and said, Hill, get out of the car? Why didn't they call the police later? They didn't do anything like that. They covered it up. They didn't come forward. So when you say that Hill just had nothing to do with it, well, then he sure heck didn't act like he was upset with it after the fact. And we saw photos from a couple days later at his birthday party. He's sitting there partying with Hill and others. So that's what it comes down to for me, is that I can't get past, certainly Hill, when he testified, showed absolutely no remorse. And I think the fact that he fired not just one round, but 6 rounds from the side, hitting Kaufman, to me is premeditation. I just can't get past that. And if the jury can't see that, I've got some serious questions for the jurors. That would be my take. On the other hand, Cowan is where I definitely think that they are having an issue, and I think it's possible they come back with a lesser charge for Cowan, but there's a lot for them to go through on that. And they're not there yet, but I think they will. And I respect the jury for taking their time and doing their diligence to go through this. It's the right thing to do. And until they're sure of it, they need to take as much time as they need. And we'll be here for the the duration. So look, we've got phone calls coming in, 737-7587. Agree with me? Disagree with me? Look, again, it's just my opinion. I'm throwing that out to get the conversation going, and we'll see how it plays out. I'll also look, we're streaming right now on Facebook at newschannel5.com. If you have a question or comment there, I'll look at those. And we're going to take you up to the 9 o'clock hour when the judge should greet the jurors, but then real quickly, we don't expect a lot happening in the courtroom. We think they'll be making their way back to begin the continued deliberation this morning. So we'll take a break and we'll be back with your phone calls and comments right after this. Morning Line, thanks for joining us. Nick Beres on this special edition of Morning Line, leading into our continuing coverage of the Caitlyn Kaufman murder trial. Nick Leonardo, our legal analyst, will be joining us in a few hours. He had some things he had to attend to today, but we're waiting for the jury to come back in to begin a second day of deliberations, and we'll follow that. We're all on verdict watch right now, but between now and then, we expect them to come into the courtroom around the 9 o'clock hour, and we'll take you in there live to see what the judge talks to them about. But in the meantime, your calls and questions. I've told you what I think so far about this case, and would like to hear what you think moving forward. So let's take some phone calls, and I'm going to observe some of the comments we're getting right now on Facebook as well. Many of you also watching on YouTube, which is great. Let's go to Mary. Mary, good morning. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Nick. How are you?
Good. What's on your mind?
Well, I lost a lot of sleep over the last 8 days thinking about this trial. And one of the questions I have not heard anybody ask is why they did not bring the evidence in of where Kyle had burnt the Cadillac. Why was that not presented?
Now, I don't know. I mean, we heard some of that come up. You're talking about during the period when they were doing cross-examination of Hill, or just about covering up the evidence? Because it did come up. You know about it. I know about it. They mentioned it. I'm trying to think, where did you think they should have brought it up more significantly?
Just so that they could show proof that he is just as guilty as Hill is.
Yeah, I think
he knew what he was doing.
I think, and that's a good argument, and I think the jury's aware of that. I think they've made it pretty darn clear that, at least in the aftermath of the shooting, Cowan, took no initiative to come forward. Okay, clearly he and Hill both were in it together after the fact, in covering this up and moving on and hoping nothing came of it. So whether that's, trying to destroy evidence by, burning the Cadillac they were in, or throwing the shell casings out, or simply, not calling 911 and reporting it. There's just no question they were trying to conceal it. And that does go toward premeditation as well. The jury can consider that. I mean, even if you believe Cowan really didn't have much to do with the actual shooting while he was driving, you sure know he tried to cover it up, and you sure know that he drove Hill away from the scene. And we know in cases, for instance, of an armed bank robbery, individual goes into a bank, shoots the guard, robs the bank, runs back out and gets into the car and drives away with someone in the getaway car. The driver of that getaway car is just as culpable as the bank robber. Okay, so in this case, well, he drove Hill away. It's not as though he said, "Hill, get out of the car, I'm calling the police." I think the jury can look at that as well. So I think that point's come across, that they clearly, from burning the Cadillac and everything else, were trying to cover it up, or certainly not come forward. Let's go to Ann. Ann, good morning. Hi, Ann.
Good morning. The later in the day, in trolling comments, I started to notice.
Are you there, Ann? We just lost your signal. Ann? Okay, Ann's a terrific caller and a regular here. Her phone just dropped out. Ann, call us back and I'll get you back on the line. Your line just dropped off for whatever reason. We lost your signal. Let's go to Peggy. Peggy, good morning. Hi, Peggy.
Good morning, Nick. And first of all, I would like to send my condolences to Miss Kaufman's family. It's so heartbreaking. But my question is, if the cutoff was at I-24 and 440, isn't there like 2.5 miles to 21st Avenue where she supposedly ended up?
That's right.
Which would give them plenty of time to think what they're going to do, and they speed it up to catch up with her.
That's right.
And second is, how did she get pulled over on the side of the road going 70 miles an hour and been shot, and she passed away within seconds? How did she get pulled over? And stopped on her own?
Well, I think it was a heroic effort on her part. We know that there's no video from the T-Dot cameras because they don't record it. And you're right. We don't know exactly the moment it was when she merged on and merged with them and allegedly cut them off. But you're absolutely right. It was some point once, she's coming from Lebanon, she comes on that bypass, comes around to get on 440. At that point, it is about 2 miles before it comes to the location where she was shot. If she cut them off somewhere between there, it gave them time to pull back around and shoot her. And when I say it was heroic, I think on the part of Caitlyn, when she was shot, all right, again, a single round of the 6 went through her shoulder, okay, tore through her lung, severed her aorta, went through her heart, fractured a rib, and then lodged in her right arm. Okay, at that moment, she has suffered a catastrophic injury. She had to go into shock almost immediately, and what we understand is that she, on her own, was able to pull over to the shoulder of the road, and I'm guessing at that point, if she discovered what had happened, was going to maybe try to call 911, but at that point, her entire chest cavity filled with 2 liters of blood, and she died within a matter of seconds. When they found the vehicle later, okay, it was on the shoulder of the road where she had been able to drive it and pull it over safely without, threatening any other cars on the road. Her foot was on the brake pedal and the engine was still running when the car was found. I think it was heroic that she was able to do that and pull over to the side the way she did. Absolutely heartbreaking. And again, that also helps explain why maybe they didn't discover her until later, because I think maybe other passing motorists would drive by and they saw a figure in the vehicle pulled over, and it wasn't crashed, it was just pulled over, and people may have seen that and thought, oh, well, someone pulled over, they're doing something on the shoulder of the road. They didn't realize that she was in that seat mortally wounded and had died by that point. But that's the answer for that. We don't know for sure, there's no video of it, but that that, based on what was found, was, in my opinion, Caitlyn Kaufman heroically able to pull to the shoulder safely without crashing, and then died before she could call 911. Okay, let's go back to Ann. She's back on 2. Ann, good morning. We got you this time. You fell out.
Good morning. Just to your comment just now, when she got hit, her foot had to have been on the brake. That injury, and I speak as an intensive care nurse, that injury was instant, so her foot was on the brake.
Okay.
My second comment is, over the weekend, I looked at Mr. Cowan's arrest history, and if you weren't listening to me yesterday, since 2010, Mr. Cowan was arrested 26 times. As the comments went on yesterday, I noticed more and more indicating his innocence. He was not innocent, and hopefully they will come today to a decision to hold him responsible. There's no doubt on Hill, but 26 arrests from 2010 that the jury does not know about, but might during the penalty phase. Thanks and for your coverage, and I'll listen.
Yeah, thank you for your call. She's right, though. That's the thing. If you look at Cowan and Hill and their adult criminal records, Cowan has a far longer rap sheet of serious offenses, including, he was sentenced to 6 years for robbery. There's federal gun charges pending that may be added now because there's that photo that we saw during trial of a felon, which he is in possession of a gun. He's posing in that photo at the birthday party with Hill holding a gun. Cowan has a long track record of crimes, okay? We know that Hill has a juvenile record that's disturbing, where he shot his grandmother, his 6-year-old sister, and a young cousin as well. None of them died, but that came out in trial because he took the stand, and because of the line of questioning, it opened the door, which allowed the prosecution to bring that up. So the defense, couldn't stop it. The jury knows what Hill did prior as a juvenile, and again, that was a long time ago, but he did that, and now he's admitted to shooting Caitlyn Kaufman. Remember, he admitted that. The jury does not know about Cowan's priors. She's right. If he's convicted, they may learn about it when it comes to sentencing, or rather the judge will know about that and take that into account. But yeah, Cowan, everyone's like, well, he was just driving. He's not a bad guy. Oh, he's a bad guy. Okay, he's got a lot of priors. But again, what role did he play in the shooting of Kaufman? That's what the jury's going to have to decide. Let's go next to Linda. Oh, wait, we don't have Linda. We'll go to Camille. Hi, Camille.
Good morning, Nick.
Morning.
Dynamic duo. You guys always do a good job.
Oh, well, thank you.
Quick question. You mentioned, obviously, that the jury did hear that Hill had previously shot 3 people.
Right.
I don't think they got in the testimony. I missed it if they did, that it was his family members. And I think if they had, that would have carried more weight. And I just wonder if Jan Norman missed an opportunity to open for another open door, where Hill was basically testifying that his family needed protection. I don't know exactly the words or the call, but did that open the door to say, were they in harm? Why would they be in harm's way? From whom? Have they been harmed?
Yeah.
Would that have been an open door there for that? Because I don't think, if they did get the family in, I certainly missed that.
Yeah, no, and you're correct. They didn't, but it wasn't because Jan Norman missed anything. It was something where the judge limited what they'd be able to go into. And I think she said, I'm trying to remember the exact words, but when the discussion was over, okay, the door's been opened, that allows us to now tell about the shootings as a juvenile. I think she made it clear that you can talk about that without getting into the specifics. And so I don't think that the prosecution was allowed to reveal exactly who it was that she shot. That's what it came down to. Jan Norman doesn't miss things like that. She would have if she could have, but that was something not allowed by the judge based on, how far they could go with revealing that. And there are real limits to that. If Nick, when he joins us later, comes on, I'll ask him that same thing about why the judge limited. You could talk about the fact that he did this shooting as a juvenile, but you can't reveal who it was he shot, how that decision was made by the judge. Let's go next to Thomas. Thomas, good morning. Hi, Thomas.
Hey, good morning.
Hey.
I agree with you 100%. I think both of them are guilty of first-degree murder and should spend the rest of their lives in prison. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll see what other folks think. Again, the conviction, if it happens for first-degree murder, will be life in prison without possibility of parole. The judge will sentence that. The lesser charges means there's going to be possibility of parole depending on the priors. Keep in mind, Cowan has so many priors that he would be probably a higher range offender, which means he will get more time than he would if he was a citizen that had no criminal record. So if he's convicted of any of these crimes, the judge will probably give him the maximum allowed under that. And I think second-degree murder, if that were to come back for him, could be up to 25 years anyway. But still, 25 years, I guess, especially as young as these men are, is better than life in prison. We'll take a break. Be back with more of your calls right after this. All right, we are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us. Nick Beres here. Special edition of Morning Line, as you know, News Channel 5 legal analyst Nick Leonardo, Nick Squared, will be joining us in the next hour or so. But we're counting down up to the 9 o'clock hour when the jury is supposed to show up. The judge will touch bases with them, and then they'll go back to continue deliberating. If you're just joining us, you know that perhaps yesterday they wrapped things up around 5 o'clock. They deliberated for around 5 hours yesterday. At the end of the day, they said, look, we need to go home, sleep on this, and come back and continue deliberations this morning. I expect a verdict today, but then again, I expected a verdict yesterday, so this is somewhat surprising, but I think most of us are in agreement that the jury is taking their time and maybe having some issues coming up with the sentence for Cowan, who was the driver of the vehicle, but not the shooter. So we'll see how this plays out. But what do you think? Let's get back to some of your phone calls, and we'll go next to, I believe, John. John, good morning. Hi, John.
Yeah.
Hey, what's on your mind?
What is that on Hill's head? Is that a gang symbol or what is that?
He's wearing a white cap, and I don't know. We haven't heard it explained by his attorneys. It's not a gang cap. It's a headdress that is typically worn by those of the Muslim faith. So, and I'm not certain. I'm assuming perhaps that Hill is Muslim, but I don't know that. But that is very similar to other, and you saw that there. We're showing that image, and that, of course, is Cowan. But there's Hill with that headdress, and that is a skull cap affiliated with the Muslim faith, and he's worn that on 2 or 3 various occasions. We have viewers, by the way, and I appreciate it on Facebook when they mention who's watching and where. As I said, we have viewers all across the country and some overseas, seeing some folks watching in Boise, Idaho. It's cold there, it's cold here. We have folks elsewhere across the country, but the majority of you are watching here in Middle Tennessee, of course, where this crime happened. But I welcome everyone to our coverage. Let's go next to Betty. Betty, good morning. Hi, Betty.
Hey, how are you this morning?
Yeah, good, doing well. What's on your mind?
Sitting here and what you were just saying a while ago as we have listened to this. Okay, first of all, they are friends. And so Hill gets in the car, and of course, okay, he puts the gun on his lap. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Cowan's driving. Now, okay, you and I are in the car, and you're sitting over there, and you've got the gun in your lap.
Yeah.
And I'm driving, and I'm going down the road. Now, all of us who drive anywhere, we have been cut off many times. So I'm driving, and I'm like, Nick, roll down the window, shoot that car. I'm driving to keep up with that car. So shoot that car. We're going to make sure that car stops. That's my scenario.
So you think they were angry and they said, let's just get them for cutting us off? Get her for cutting us off?
Exactly. It's
okay.
Like, okay, I'm not going to leave. And maybe Hill had no intention. He had an intention of going to shoot somebody somewhere.
Yeah.
Or he would have put it in the floorboard or put it somewhere.
Yeah.
But I'm driving, and yes, like I said, all of us, we've been cut off how many times? But do you try to pull over and shoot somebody or whoever's riding with you?
Yeah,
hey,
doesn't make sense. We can go back to when Devontae Hill took the stand, and I hear you talking. I agree with you, okay? And this is what he said, when he was being questioned by his attorney when he took the stand. She came from the left, cut us off. Cowan hit the brakes, and that apparently startled him. Cowan had to hit the brakes, according to Hill. Hill said he then picked up the gun and fired. He can't recall how many shots he fired. He says he wasn't thinking the right way. He can't explain. It was just a reaction, and that he was full of rage at that moment, not calm, and that's it. So he's saying it was in a fit of passion. Okay, it just doesn't ring true to me, okay, because she passed in that moment, she's in front of them, and the bullets fired were not from behind. If that's true, the story he said, okay, you would have found the bullet holes in the back of the car. But no, at that moment, he had to grab the gun, and you have to figure, if she was ahead of him, Cowan had to accelerate to catch back up to her. They're parallel to her. He's shooting from the passenger side window through her driver's side window, hitting her in the shoulder. And he's not just firing one round, he's firing 6 rounds into the driver's seat of another car. You don't think you're trying to shoot someone? You fire 6 rounds into a car with someone in it, you're trying to kill him, okay? Don't tell me otherwise. And that's why it just didn't make sense to me. He also testified that one of the very first things he said was that Cowan had nothing to do with the shooting. Cowan had nothing to do with the shooting. Cowan is a cousin of his, a friend of his, and a fellow Crips gang member. Okay, do you believe him when he says Cowan had nothing to do with it, or is he protecting a fellow gang member and family member? I don't know. Let's go next to Dale on, I believe, line 10. Dale, good morning, Dale.
Good morning, Nick. How you doing?
Good. What's on your mind?
I'm like you. I didn't think it would take over 30 minutes to come back with a verdict. But I believe both are guilty because, the driver, he could have slowed down, he could have speeded up and went on fire, but yet he chose to pull right beside her and the guy's shooting at her. So he's just as guilty as the other one. That's my opinion,
All right. No.
So
okay.
I think they both should get death penalty, but Tennessee don't have death penalty, so I think they ought to get first-degree murder.
Okay, yeah, the Tennessee does have the death penalty, but the district attorney in Davidson County, each county's district attorney can decide whether to seek the death penalty, and Glenn Funk is not seeking the death penalty in this case. He typically does not seek the death penalty. Also, I'm not sure this qualified for death penalty because, as I said, there has to be an aggravating circumstance. This was a murder, but it wasn't a murder in the commission of another crime. It doesn't meet some of those aggravating circumstances, but that's beside the point. The DA here in Davidson County does not seek the death penalty, so they would get life in prison. Keep in mind, I hear a lot of people saying that they're in agreement with kind of my point of view on this, but I'm telling you right now, this jury, and I think with good reason, is taking their time, and I'm guessing that the delay coming back with a verdict on this is not because of a dispute over Hill. It's a dispute over Cowan, who is the driver, and they're not sure whether he should be charged with first-degree murder or a lesser charge, and they're taking their time going through that. That's my guess. That's my guess. Who knows? Maybe they're split on Hill as well. It's hard to predict what a jury is thinking. Again, this is a jury of 9 women, 3 men, and they're all in the range of 50 years or older, maybe 1 or 2 a little bit younger. That's how it breaks down. Let's get some more phone calls here, and we go next to Herman, I believe. Good morning, Herman. Hi, Herman.
Good morning, Nick. How you doing this morning?
Good. What's on your mind?
Well, you know, yesterday's been brought up several times about Hill's use record. And Nick brought up yesterday, said don't judge the youth offender program based on these kids. He said for every one that goes bad, there's 100 that succeed.
Sure.
And the problem with this is a prime example of why that program needs to be scrapped, because there are far too many. If there are this many kids, if the 1 in 100, look, all you have to do is look at the crime rate in Nashville, the carjackings, all the stuff by young thugs, and look at any criminal records. The program needs to be scrapped altogether. Make these kids, put these kids behind bars, do what they say, and if we had a district attorney that would not be mollycoddling criminals such as what Glenn Funk does, we have a lot less of these problems. We have a very weak DA on crime. He's more pro-criminal than he is stopping crime, and this is the end result. If we had tougher laws that were actually enforced, and if 20 years meant 20 years, Caitlyn Kaufman would still be alive today.
Listen, this is a tragic case, and that argument's been made. Look, when a juvenile commits a crime, and I think the focus on that should be potentially on not locking them up for the rest of their lives. Because here's the thing. First of all, they're very young. Second of all, I don't want to pay for someone to be locked up for the rest of their lives if I can avoid it, because it's very expensive. We're going to have to build new prisons and jails. The idea is of maybe rehabbing them. The difference here, and where I certainly do agree with you, Herman, is the nature of the crime and how serious it is. I see too many of these juveniles, personally myself, who commit just awful crimes that are not really feeling the punishment the way they should. And certainly we have Hill here, who shot his grandmother, shot a sister, shot a cousin, tried to shoot his mom, but she was hiding behind a couch. And, you know, that was in juvie court, and that was about it. You know, is that not a red flag that this kid's got some issues we may really need to deal with? It's the nature of the seriousness of the crime sometimes. And too often it's like, unless these youngsters commit just a horrible murder, they're not transferred to adult court or dealt with. So the state legislature may have to look at toughening some of the juvenile statutes, but at the same time, I think we never need to forget the idea that most juvies, and Nick said this, that commit some crimes, they're not all hardened criminals like Hill or Cowan. You know, they can be rehabbed, and that's in everyone's best interest to get them back out and be functioning members of society. As I said, too often these days, we're all sitting here saying, oh, just lock them up and throw away the key. You know what? You ready to pay millions and millions more to build more prisons and just lock up more and more people? That's not the solution. But too often these days, everyone's just so quick. Lock them up, lock them up. There was a story the other day where a couple of grade schoolers were playing with matches and caught some grass on fire in Spring Hill. Mistake, wrong thing. Grade school kids doing this, elementary school, okay? And fortunately the fire was put out, didn't damage the homes, burned the lawn. And I'm looking, I posted that on my Facebook page. And what was going to happen was, once they traced it, because of some security video showing these kids messing around with the matches starting the fire, the fire marshal said, yes, they've been located. We've contacted their parents, and they will be coming by the fire station later this week for instruction on fire safety and to tell them how dangerous it was, what they said. Okay, and I'm looking on my Facebook page, and there's people like, what? That's it? Throw the book at them. And I'm like, if that's you, you're just wrong. These are elementary school kids, but there's this attitude in society today for even a crime. And look, I played with matches when I was in elementary school. It was awful. It was wrong, and I learned my lesson and stopped. I didn't need to be locked up and thrown in juvie because of that. as an elementary school student. But I see these people these days going, oh, well, just lock them up. You know, they're just going to have to go to the fire station and get a lecture when they started that horrible grass fire. Let's get some perspective here, folks. And back off just a bit. They're not carjacking someone violently. These were elementary school kids doing something dumb with some matches, and hopefully they've learned a lesson and will never do it again. Let's not go overboard. Perspective, please. All right, let's go next to Ruth. Let's see. Ruth, good morning, Ruth. What's on your mind?
Yes, I think both of them is guilty. And if it was left up to me, they'd get the electric chair. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ruth. On that cheery note, we're going to take a break. We'll be back with more of your calls, more of our comments as we watch things developing in the courtroom. We'll take you there at the 9 o'clock hour. Stay with us. Joining us, Nick Beres here, counting down to the opening of the courtroom. We just checked in with our pool photographer. Has not been allowed in the courtroom yet to set up, but nothing's began there. And keep in mind, folks, the jury's just going to show up briefly to touch bases with the judge and then go back and continue deliberation. We're basically just on verdict watch today. After 7 days of trial, today is verdict watch. Nick Leonardo will be joining me in the not too distant future. We'll continue taking your calls. Comments. Remember, we're live on Facebook at newschannel5.com. We're also at the News Channel 5 page, and that's on YouTube. We're here on the Plus, and you can message me at Nick Beres NC5, my Facebook page there, and I'll try to get back to you with any of your questions. Let's get back to the lines, and we go next to Lee. Lee, what's on your mind, Lee?
Hey, I've got one question. Do you know what happened to her dog?
Oh, okay. I think I understood what you were asking there. Caitlyn Kaufman was a big animal lover, and when she was living here in Lebanon, and you may have seen photos after the fact when we did stories, she had a huge Great Dane. Wonderful, wonderful, beautiful dog. And I'm assuming the dog is with her family. I don't know. The dog obviously was at home, was not with her in the vehicle. She was on her way to work, so the dog was okay. But yeah, I forget the name of the dog, but I remember there was a picture of her and the dog. I don't know. We may be able to find it. I can share it with you. But the dog, I'm guessing, is with her family. But that was heartbreaking too. She loved that dog very much from what we heard, and is just a beautiful, beautiful Great Dane. And so I'm hoping that the dog is safe and with the family. Let's go next to, I think, Norman. Norman, good morning. Hi, Norman. Are you there, Norm? Did I go to the wrong thing? Oh, I guess Norman hung up. I apologize. This is Frank. Go ahead, Frank.
Hi, Nick.
Hey, Frank. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
No problem. Oh boy, I got a laundry list here, Nick.
Okay.
Especially after some of the calls that came through. But I'll try to be fast and to the point. As the issue of juvenile rehab came up in the cost. I mean, I understand the cost, but what is the cost of increasing crime and lawlessness? Really, we awards are made for somebody spilling coffee, for putting a coffee between their legs, and which is a dumb move, and getting millions of dollars. So it's not about the money, Nick. Really, let's get this right, because we're going in the wrong direction. Otherwise, I want to say we don't know the numbers. What is the juvenile rehab rate? What percentage are actually rehabbed? Same thing with recidivism. How often does rehab actually work? I don't think it's been working much in this country. If you really want to put all your marbles out there on the table, I don't think the statistics really show that. But I see a lot of talk about it, but I don't see a lot of numbers.
Well, you only see the horrible crimes committed by these youngsters. You're not hearing about the many youngsters that commit far lesser crimes. I hope you're not advocating just locking up teens left and right for minor crimes, because if you are, you're wrong.
No, I'm talking about serious crimes.
Okay.
I'm not talking about theft.
Yeah, you heard my story earlier about the kids, playing with matches. That's just stupid thinking about, come on, let's get real.
And accidents do happen, but then what happened with that kid that was up there in East Tennessee that a few years back that started that huge fire where people died playing with matches on a hill on an extremely windy day, and it got out of control.
Sure.
And I believe he was a sheriff department son or something like that. What happened? I don't know. I don't remember. But anyway, I don't want to bring that up again, because that was I'm sure he's paying for that internally as much as anything. Let's face it, people are talking about what either Hill or Talon said. These guys are career criminals. They're liars. They take the oath, but that doesn't mean anything to them. The oath means something to people that tell the truth, that have nothing to hide.
Right.
These guys have been hiding ever since they committed a crime. It's like, you're supposed to use common sense. Common sense is determining whatever Hill says that came out of his mouth is pretty much a lie, except where he has nowhere else to turn, which is that he shot a gun and killed a woman.
Interesting.
Now, Talon, if someone takes their car and runs through a crowd of people or protesters, is that car not a
weapon?
Instrument of death?
Sure.
It's a weapon.
Sure.
Yeah. So let's not create something that's not there. There is intent. There's obvious intent, because if he's cut off, he's behind. So you have the time in between that happens and catching up to determine, I know I'm mad, what's the best move? What's the smart move? No, instead, it escalates internally in the car. And you've got, nobody's talked. They probably had discussions, but they're never going to talk about it. They're not going to reveal that under oath. But this was a planned killing at that point.
Listen, I appreciate your point of view there, and I think a lot of people may agree that. And it's interesting what you said, that if you want to believe, the only thing you know for sure is truthful in what Hill testified to. And some of what he said may have been truthful beyond this, but the only thing that you know for sure is that he shot and killed Caitlyn Kaufman. He admitted that. He said that right off the top. He's conceded that. He's basically saying, yes, I expect to be convicted of something here. I expect to spend a lot of time behind bars. But his attorney is saying it was not first-degree murder. It was a lesser charge, which would give him a chance of someday getting out of prison. Beyond that, how much did you believe of what he testified? He said that they didn't say anything to each other after the shooting. They just shot her and kept driving, didn't say anything. He said, I can't remember. He said they didn't say anything, and that Cowan didn't tell him or command him to do anything after they got cut off. Or he said he can't recall what was said. But then they asked later about what they talked about, and he could recall that clear as a bell. Selective memory. That all goes to credibility, and I guarantee you the jury took note of that. So we will see. Frank, thank you for your call. Let's go next to Al, I believe. Al, good morning. Hi, Al. Are you there, Al? Al.
Listen, I'm just saying, justice has a way of finding its course in this world, and I'm from the streets of Baltimore, rough town, buddy, and I'm looking at these two things there, and I'm saying to myself, they're too darn young and too darn pretty to be going to a real man's prison, and I think that first week or so, the justice will truly just begin. I rest my case. Thank you, Mick.
All right, thank you, Al. We missed the first part of his call, but I think we got the gist of it. Let's go next to Catherine. Catherine, good morning. Hi, Catherine.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Well, it's a bad situation, and I hate to put it all on the law, but if the law could enforce the issue of these juveniles and criminals carrying their guns around, they have no help. The law has no help. Any way they try to enforce it, they've got the whole world against them. You couldn't pay me enough to be a police officer. They're called on the first time. And the call about this is both of those guys are criminals. They know the commitment they've done. When you pull a gun, you're going to use it. You shouldn't even have it if you're a criminal to begin with. That's where I'm getting back to the law. Everything's put on the law, and the criminals are the ones that's being defended by the public because of their color or their age or whatever being the reason. I think if the law could be backed up a little bit more by the public, and these criminals get put in the military or somewhere and get some use out of themselves and realize that this is life. This ain't just a game that you're playing on TV, and realize that these are people's lives that you're pulling your little gun out for and acting like you're on a video game.
Yeah, listen, it's a complex issue. It's an absolutely complex issue. Hill had that weapon on his lap. Hill, not a convicted felon, so, he could own a gun. I don't know if that one was legally owned or not, but Cowan could not. He's a convicted felon and was seen in a photograph 2 days after the shooting holding a gun. So that may be added to some of his criminal cases that are pending right now in federal court. The thing about Cowan is that the jury does not know about his prior criminal history. They do know about Hill's. And so the jury continues to deliberate this morning. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back and we're going to monitor things. I understand things getting up and running in the courtroom. We'll take you there right after this. Beres here. It's 8:54. Things expected to begin in the courtroom 9 o'clock, we expect the jury should be there if they made it through the cold weather this morning. Hopefully the ice wasn't an issue for them. The judge will meet with them briefly. We'll take you in the courtroom if and when that happens, and then they're back to begin deliberating, and we're on verdict watch. So we'll stick with that. We have a live picture from the courtroom right now. The camera just up showing the seal, so no one really in the courtroom yet. But as soon as it happens, we'll go in there, and it'll likely just be the judge greeting the jury, asking if they have any issues, and then say, get back there and get started. Let's go next on the horn to Carol. Carol, good morning. Hi, Carol.
Nick, good morning.
Hey,
Appreciate
what's on your mind?
your coverage of this trial.
Thank you.
Just a procedural legal question. There's two defendants, Hill, and everybody's pretty much agreed upon Hill being guilty and the verdict not being much of an issue with him. But for Kaufman, I see that there's a real issue with which degree of guilt he may be found, found guilty of. And if so, if the jury becomes hung on that issue, does that create a hung jury for both defendants, or does it create just an issue, hung issue on the verdict for Kaufman?
Great question, and you know what? I asked the same question yesterday of Nick Leonardo, so I'm not the lawyer. It's a legal question, but he answered it for me yesterday, and I'll answer for it now. No, it does not change. It's not all or nothing in this. If the jury comes back, let's say at some point, and tells the judge, look, we've reached a verdict on Hill, but we are deadlocked and cannot get past a disagreement on Cowan, then potentially after a period of time, the judge could decide, well, okay, we will accept the Hill verdict, and he will take his sentencing, and that'll be it for Hill. And Cowan, if it turns out to be a hung jury, would get a new trial. Or the judge would say, let's spend some more time, see if you can work it through. But yeah, they're not connected. It's not an all or nothing thing. Yes, they're tried together, but they can come back with separate verdicts. And if one is not reached, it doesn't mean the verdict on Hill is null and void. It stands and it will go if that's the way it plays out. So yeah, great question, but that will not influence it if they come to a verdict for one but not the other. Let's go next to Sully. Sully, good morning. Hi, Sully.
Good morning, Nick. How are you this morning, bud?
Good. What's on your mind?
I was just wondering, Nick, I haven't been able to watch this one as much as the others, but what kind of a timeline was the initial interaction? I mean, did this thing go on for miles? Because I keep getting the feeling that maybe at that time of the morning, this guy riding around with a gun in the window down, that maybe they were trying to carjack her, and maybe she was trying to get away more than anything. And I know the initial thing when it first came up, wasn't she off the side of the road like she'd been forced off the road? So, I mean, what timeline are we talking about? How long this took place? For miles or
no,
within
it's
a half a mile?
A matter of minutes, if that. And keep in mind, this happened in the evening, not the morning. She was on her way into the evening shift at St. Thomas West. And the thinking, and I understand you weren't able to watch it all, is that they perceived that she cut them off. And there was a period of time where they drove along I-440 before they got to that stretch where the shooting occurred between Hillsborough and West End exits there on I-440, a very busy area. It was around 6, I forget the exact number, 6 in the evening. So it was dark, it was wet, and the shooting happened. And she was not forced off the road. In fact, to the contrary, she, after she was shot, was able to make it to the shoulder, did not crash, did not collide with any other vehicles, even though she was mortally wounded. And when she was found several hours later, deceased in the vehicle, the engine was still running, parked on the shoulder of the road with her foot still on the brake pedal. I think she was heroic in the way she got off the interstate, was unable to call 911 because she died in a matter of seconds. But it all occurred quickly, and I don't believe there was any carjacking effort or anything along those lines. None of that has been broached by the prosecution. They believe this was some reaction to a perceived road rage. They just got mad, the gun was right there, and they shot her. That's basically the story Hill tells. All right, let's go next to Jimmy on line 3. Good morning, Jimmy. Hi, Jimmy.
Yeah, how you doing?
Good. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I'm going to say that both of these guys is guilty, because if I'm driving and I see you with a gun in your hand, I'm going to think you're up to something. And you tell me to catch up, get behind this car, I'll say that you're guilty as the guy that pulled the trigger. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people may think this. Let's see, what do we have here? I'm just looking at some of the comments, and I think a lot of people might agree with Jimmy, but yeah, I think people on Facebook are posting that they think if there is a delay here, it's that the jury is trying to discuss, the situation with Cowan and whether or not he should be found guilty of a lesser charge. I don't think there's any chance they're going to find Cowan not guilty and blameless in this. But the question is, if it's first-degree murder or a lesser crime, and anything less than a first-degree murder is a victory for Cowan, because that gives him a chance at someday getting out of prison. Let's go next to Michael. Michael, good morning. Hi, Michael.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
I just want to say something. The guy that talked earlier about Attorney General Funk, I 100% agree. Ever since he's gotten into office, I've just seen, especially with the Waffle House shooter and a bunch of others, just coddling the criminals. And I understand they got rights and all that, but I just think jails are there for one reason, to protect society. These two people, they were going to, if it wasn't Caitlyn Kaufman, they were going to kill somebody, and society has a right to be protected from people like these two. From people like these two. And I don't know, the last few years, ever since Mr. Funk's gotten in office, I just always had this feeling that criminals are getting, more of the benefit of the doubt than the victims are. And that's just my 2 cents worth.
Okay. Thank you for your call. Keep in mind, when it comes to cases like this, it's not all on the DA's office. Certainly, they weigh in when a juvenile is charged or, linked to a serious crime, but it's the juvenile court judge that makes the call on whether or not that youngster gets transferred from juvenile court to adult court, okay? So that is something, if you want to complain about, why isn't someone in adult court? That's not necessarily the DA's fault. That is the juvenile court judge that ultimately can make the decision on whether to transfer someone. And that's a very serious decision to make. Once you transfer a youngster to adult court, that is a serious thing, because all of a sudden their future as very young people just goes down the tubes, because they're in adult court, they're facing adult sentences. And I'm not saying that there aren't those types of crimes that deserve that. Certainly they do. And that's where the dispute is. Does this judge not transfer enough of these youngsters when they commit very, very serious crimes? And it should just be for the most serious ones. But too often we hear about these violent carjackings, and then these individuals are caught with a bunch of stolen weapons after they pistol whipped someone and the car was recovered, and they go to juvie, and next thing you know, they're still in juvie. They're not transferred. Well, you know what? I have a problem with that. And I have a problem with a juvenile court judge that says, well, it's happened a couple of times, but we're not giving up on this kid. What does it take for you to say, let's go to, adult court? Got to murder someone to get there? Not a good call. Let's see. We're waiting right now for things to begin. It's 9 o'clock, and as we monitor the seal there, the jury perhaps is late getting in this morning because of the severe weather, but to keep in mind that they deliberated yesterday for about 5 hours. We've heard from a lot of people. We've put the phones on hold here just for a moment because we think they'll be jumping in a moment, and we want to hear what the judge has to say. But yeah, they deliberated for 5 hours yesterday after hearing the closing arguments, and decided then to go back home. Keep in mind, this jury is not sequestered. Each night they go back home to their beds and their families. And the judge said, even more important than ever before, now that you're in deliberations, please, when you go home, do not talk about the case. Do not go and watch any of the news coverage. Do not watch Gavel to Gavel on the Plus. Stay away from that. And I'd like to believe that the jury abides by that. But, it's just interesting dynamic. I've never been on a jury, but imagine they're going back home, and their loved ones, their family and friends know they're on this jury. And they've probably been watching this trial. And they come back, and it's like, boy, I can imagine if my wife was on something like this, I'd be dying to ask her questions. I've been watching. What do you think? What's the rest of the jury? You can't do that. You can't do it. Does that happen sometimes? Probably. You just hope that if it happens, it doesn't tarnish their ability to fairly reach a verdict in this case. Again, the judge is going to let them go as long as needed today. My belief, and Nick Leonardo's yesterday when we were talking about it, is that had they been close last night when the judge checked on them around 5:30, they would have said, you know what, we're close to almost wrapping this up. Let's finish this up. Give us another hour and we'll be out of here. My take in the fact that they decided to go home yesterday and come back this morning, unless they had it all packaged up and done and they went home and said, well, we'll just come in first thing tomorrow morning, we'll tell her we have the verdict, but let's all sleep on it to make sure we're good with it. Short of that, which I don't think is the case, I don't think they were close on whatever the disagreement is back there, and that they're hoping that they sleep on it, consider what they've talked about, and come back today and maybe can work it out. Remember, you have to have a unanimous verdict of the 12. If there is just one or two that feel instead of first-degree murder, it's second-degree murder or facilitation of murder, and they can't agree and they won't budge and they won't budge, then they have to talk it out, and eventually there has to be some kind of compromise. In rare cases, but you know it certainly happens, that never occurs and you have a hung jury. But as that last caller I explained, if they've reached a verdict on one of these defendants, that will stand. If there's a hung jury on the second, then that's something that they'll have to try again. I don't think it'll come to that. They have a lot to consider too. I'm trying to look back at, remember this trial started really with the evidence phase last Wednesday, and the defense, let's see, called only really 2 witnesses. But the prosecution called, I think, a grand total of 17 witnesses. There were several exhibits, photographs, there were transcripts, which they weren't able to bring back, but audio recordings of phone calls. There's a lot for them over 5 days of evidence to go over and review. And all of that was sent back to the jury room with them. And maybe that's what they're taking their time going through, okay, and trying to determine. I don't know how long the judge will let them go. The judge has been very good, I think, about being clear. I'll let the jury decide. If they need to go all day long, she's going to let them go all day long. They may go to lunch and have lunch and then come back and continue. I think we should get a verdict by this afternoon. But as I've said, sometimes there's more pressure on a jury that's sequestered because they've been locked away for a whole week, away from everyone they know, sleeping in an unfamiliar bed in some hotel, and they're ready to go home. In this case, they get to go home, and maybe that same pressure isn't there, but trust me, I think they're all probably ready to go home, but that shouldn't be it. You don't want to be a juror that says, you know what, I'm ready to go home. I don't care what. I'll just vote verdict on this, whatever. That's not it. And I don't think these jurors are doing this. I respect the job they're doing, and without them, we wouldn't be able to have a trial, right? So thank you to the jury. There's something happening in the courtroom. Let's listen in here if he pulls out. Here we go.
Glad everybody made it in safely. Go ahead and bring them out. And tell Tim to line up the jury, please.
Before the jury comes in, state objects to Mr. Cowan having his prop. Excuse me?
Yes. Mr. Cowan, just place it on the table there. That's fine. All right. Just place it on the table.
All right.
Okay, we may all be seated. Let the record reflect that the jury deliberating in this case is present. It is Tuesday, January 31st. I'm glad that everybody made it in safely. I know that it was cold out there and wet, and hopefully we'll see what happens with the weather as the day progresses. I will be monitoring because obviously your safety is the court's concern. Hopefully everybody adhered to my instructions yesterday about no outside research, no viewing of anything in the media or anything, or discussing the case among yourselves. Well, when the 12 of you are together, you discuss. But and just remember that if you take any rest breaks or anything, you must cease discussion or deliberating on the case, because the only time that you all can talk about the case is when all 12 of you are together in the deliberation room. Okay. All right. Okay, you may go back in.
All rise.
All right, y'all be handy in case there are questions or anything.
All right, you see the two defendants leaving the courtroom. They're both, interestingly enough, wearing pink shirts today, and she didn't really address it. You may have caught real quickly there, briefly, you heard Deputy District Attorney Roger Moore object to what he said James Cowan had as a prop. He called it a prop, and the judge just told Cowan to put it on the table, and I'm guessing he was referring to the Bible that Cowan had been holding in court yesterday and perhaps the day before and had with him. The judge just said, please, to Cowan, put that on the table. We couldn't see what it was, but she didn't do anything more with it, so maybe that's a moot point, but it sounded to me like the prosecution felt that Cowan was using that Bible as a prop to make it appear as though he is a more godly person, and it just appears the moment they're deliberating for them to see him holding a Bible. Didn't go anywhere on that. Many of you had mentioned that you had seen him holding the Bible prior, and that's the first we've really heard him discuss it in court, at least an objection, but didn't go anywhere. All right, so they've stepped away. We spent the past hour basically taking your emails and comments, messaging on Facebook and phone calls. What we're going to do is take a break now. We're going to step away. When we come back in an hour or two, we will monitor. If anything develops with the jury, or if there is a question or something happening in the courtroom, I promise you, we will come right in and take it live. If, for instance, there's nothing between now and 11 o'clock, we'll probably come back on around 11 o'clock and update you, unless I hear of some other updates from there that we want to share with you. So we'll maybe take an hour or two off now. We'll be on Verdict Watch. We will alert you if anything develops. You stay tuned. In the meantime, we'll go back to our regularly scheduled program. So stay tuned with us. The moment we get word on a verdict in the Caitlyn Kaufman murder trial, we will be back on live with the very latest on all of that. We'll see you in just a bit.